faith, firearms, freedom. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
All right, welcome back. It's our 200th episode Extravaganza, and we are back with another special guest, the creator and co-host of the long-running Table Talk Radio podcast, and the pastor at Faith Lutheran Church in Road River, Oregon, Evan Goeglein, former guest. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and thanks for having me on.
So let me get all the rest of our crazy crew in here as well. Now you've been a friend of the show from like season 1, I think. You were on the show 3 episodes first season, and you haven't been back. We gotta get you back on here.
Yeah, we need to rectify that.
Table Talk Radio. I know as much as you guys have been trying to quit, you just can't seem to give it up. 400 and what did I see? 480 some odd episodes now.
Yeah, it sounds about right. Crazy.
The show that just won't die.
Yeah, it's not for lack of trying, though.
Talk about how you got the inspiration to do this. Is a great story, and Pastor Wolfmueller told it when he was on the show once. I want to hear it from your mouth. How did you get this
fact checking?
idea?
Huh? See if it's fake news that what he's been talking about. Okay.
Well, it's coming from Brian, so you never know.
All right. Well, I did a little bit of radio when I was in high school, and I started in our small town a theological show. Had him on a few times, and then I went off to seminary. And so he always wanted to do something in radio, and I had a little bit of experience. So I said, well, why don't we do it? It's funny because I was in the middle of a seminary class where he had to do some kind of a project. So I kind of folded my work onto this the show as part of the project, just so I could use it as an excuse to work on it. So, got that homework assignment done, and then continued working on the idea for a podcast. We started out with the idea of actually doing kind of like a syndicated radio show, and we worked hard. We got advertising dollars, bought airtime on different radio stations, and we were just working our butt offs trying to get our sponsorship to get on airtime. Meanwhile, people are downloading our show on the internet. We're going, why are we spending all our time trying to get advertising dollars beyond radio stations? And we still are on a few. But meanwhile, this internet thing, podcasting, is taking off. So we just put all of our energy behind that, and it really took off. So, but really the idea behind the show was sort of Brian's idea. It was a theological game show. And the idea was to not take ourselves too seriously, but to take the theology seriously. So we played various games like Law or Gospel. We play things like Bible Bee, where you read a Bible verse and you have to guess what book of the Bible it's in, and various games that try to make it a little bit more engaging, not just kind of a dry discussion, but try to bring the listener in a little bit. So that's kind of what we're doing with Table Talk.
How are you? Where do you get the ideas for the games? You've got a huge selection of games that you guys play.
Well, usually they just kind of pop into our head when we're doing something else. But really, we have a liner somewhere in the show that says the games are just an excuse, and that really is true. That it really starts with what we want to talk about, and we think, well, what game would get us to that point? And so, we maybe if we want to analyze something that was in the news, for example, we'll think of a game that would get to that. Some of our older games is like Which Ladder, that looks at the ladder of moralism, mysticism, or rationalism. And so we'll play a clip, and then we'll ask, which ladder is it? Or we have a game called 10 Commandments in the News, where we look at the news story, then ask, how are the 10 Commandments engaged in this article? So just some ways to kind of get at talking points that get Christians thinking, but in a little bit more fun way.
We ripped off that last one, by the way.
Good. Well, it's
we're not paying any royalties for it.
Yeah. The idea is so that other people would do this in other contexts. So good for you. That's what we want to happen.
Yep. We've done Crime in the 10 Commandments, which is
cool. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yep. So you you are the pastor at Faith Lutheran Church in Rogue River, and you have a radio. The reason that you're here is not only because you've been involved, sort of a guest on the show and a fan of the show from year one, but you have a radio station that your church operates. Was that something that came with the call, or was that because of your being a fan of radio and your interest in radio that you said, we need a radio station?
Yeah, well, so the radio station did not exist before I got there, but that wasn't on my radar or anything that I thought would be a project for us. But I happened to cross. This was I think back in 2013, 2014. I happened to cross this opportunity that the FCC puts out. It's called a low power FM license, and what it does is allows you broadcast up to 100 watts. And so they only have a filing window for this opportunity once every very so often. I think the last one before 2013 was the year 2000. So every 13 years or so. but they don't make any promises when they'll allow it to happen. So I found out about it, and I went to the church. And I said, hey, this is something that we could do. I have a little bit of experience. I think we could talk to the right people and make it happen. What do you guys think? And they loved the idea. And so we went through the licensing process, hired the right people to get the paperwork filed and the engineering behind it. I didn't know how to do any of that, but in 2015 we launched, and we've been going ever since. So it's like I said, a small 100 watt broadcast, and we kind of have two goals with it. On the one hand, we want to get our theology, our doctrine out to the community so that people know what we believe and what we teach. But we also have emphasis on supporting the community. So we have a volunteer in town that does the local high school sports, for example, and things like that. So it's kind of a dual purpose radio station.
Very cool. And Armed Lutheran Radio is on exactly one terrestrial radio station in the world, and it just happens to be KRRC 94.3 The Bridge, operated by Faith Lutheran Church in Rogue River, Oregon. Evan invited me to be part of the lineup. And I'm sure his congregation hasn't let him forget that.
Well, I mean, it's great. I think what you're doing is great, and kudos to you, because you're bringing. It's not just a show about guns; it's also a show that considering the theology with it as well. And so, I like those kinds of shows in particular because it draws maybe two interest groups together. And so whether maybe you're not a Lutheran, but you are interested in topics of guns, be it gun safety or competition shooting, or maybe you're not into guns, but you're more into the theological side, so that helps you get into it. So
you mentioned when you proposed this to me, you mentioned that you thought this would be a good fit for the area that Faith Lutheran is in. Why is that?
Yeah, well, so when I got the call to Oregon, I had certain assumptions about Oregon that are not true in the entire state. I mean, everyone knows that Oregon as a state leans left and has a lot of gun control laws and things like that. And so I just kind of assumed that was true of the entire state. When I actually got here to Southern Oregon, I found there's a very conservative mindset, politically speaking, in Southern Oregon. And it's like a lot of states, really. A lot of states have kind of the left political owned by the major city and where the legislature is. But a lot of the rural areas are very conservative. I find that's true in most states. And Oregon's no exception. So I was seeing the bumper stickers around, and they were not fitting with my assumptions about the state of Oregon. So, but yeah, so Southern Oregon is very conservative. They have a lot of conservative groups around, including that of gun rights and things like that. So it's a good fit for those reasons. Like I mentioned before, bringing kind of two different interest groups together in one show, it's perfect for that.
Absolutely. So, and we have done an episode, John and I did an episode about, what's the guy's name? Mark Knutson from Augustana Lutheran in Eugene. who
Lutheran.
right, who heads this. I don't even remember the name of his group, but he was spearheading this campaign to pass gun control there, and actually, I think it was confiscation, wasn't it, John?
Yeah, I believe so.
It was pretty radical, and he and other faith leaders, again in air quotes, had come together at his church to have this interfaith announcement of this campaign, and so we kind of fisked that whole thing and had fun with it. That turned into an entire episode. I remember the first time I had Brian, your co-host, on the show, and I remember the first time you guys mentioned the show on Table Talk Radio, and what were your early impressions of the podcast? You know, irrespective of what he thought of it, let's leave him out of this. Having heard it, what did you think?
Well, I mean, it's called the Armed Lutheran, so you kind of wonder, is this guy going around with guns blazing, saying, believe in this theology or else, or what's going on? No, not really. Like it's really in the name, right? I mean, you have both sides of what you're talking about. I mean, so there's always a discussion when we get into things that are that can be, I should say, political. So, for example, the classic political lines might be drawn with, like, gun control is one of them, but budgetary concerns, taxes, education, those are all kind of political things. Now, within the context of my church, there might be people who vary on what they think about education, for example, and there's no kind of biblically mandated you must think thusly about education, and so I think for that reason, a lot of pastors are sort of touchy about things that are seen as political, and so there's maybe a first impression wondering, what is this guy's agenda? I mean, what's he trying to pull off here? Like, are you saying that you're mandated by God to own a gun and open carry? I mean, is that what God has commanded? But upon a listen, I one of the things I liked about the show is that it didn't just talk about the political aspects of gun ownership. It talks about gun safety, sportsmanship. I don't know. Do you talk about hunting? Do you engage that at all? Oh, yeah. Right
Mia down here is our resident. There you go. She is our resident hunting guide.
Excellent. So I think that's fantastic, and that engages a lot of different topics that way. Then,
awesome. Well, thank you so much for inviting Armed Lutheran Radio to be a part of your lineup. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for your support. Please come back on the show again. I'd love to have you. I enjoyed the opportunities that we had to visit with you, and keep up the good work there at Rogue River, and good luck keeping Brian in line.
Yeah, your prayers would be appreciated for that. Thank you all, and thank you for all the work you put into the show too. I mean, I know that's a lot of work, a lot of editing, and you do a great job. It sounds very professional, and that's one of the reasons we like it on the station. And hope that it gets a broader listenership, because it's well deserved. So you keep up the good work as well.
Well, thank you very much.